According to Ernest Shackleton, a man's true character is revealed not when everything goes right, but when his world falls apart. And in 1914, his world literally collapsed. In the freezing cold of Antarctica, where even hope seemed frozen, he and 27 men came face to face with death. But Shackleton knew one thing for certain. True leadership begins when you're confronted with the impossible. 1914 was the year Ernest Shackleton set out to achieve his greatest dream. The 40-year-old Irish explorer had taken on a task no human had ever accomplished, crossing the entire Antarctic continent. This imperial trans-Antarctic expedition wasn't just a geographical exploration, it was a challenge that would test the very limits of human will. Shackleton's plan was breathtakingly bold. They would start from the Weddell Sea, pass through the South Pole, and walk 2,800 kilometers to the Ross Sea. That distance was longer than from Istanbul to London, but across ice-covered, uninhabited, deadly terrain. Shackleton's pride and joy was his ship, the Endurance. Built specifically for polar expeditions by master Norwegian shipbuilders, this 44-meter vessel was constructed strong enough to break through solid ice. The ship didn't carry the name Endurance, meaning patience and resilience, for nothing. The crew selection was pure Shackleton genius. From 5,000 applicants, he carefully chose 27 men, experienced sailors, scientists, a photographer, a cook. Each had special skills, but what Shackleton really sought wasn't technical ability, it was character. "I never take anyone who isn't optimistic," he would say. They departed from South Georgia Island on December 5, 1914. Norwegian whalers there had warned them. This year, the ice is much thicker and has come earlier than normal. But Shackleton was determined, because this wasn't just exploration. It would be a heroic story to boost British morale in the midst of World War I. The first days were promising. The Endurance navigated skillfully through ice channels, the crew singing songs. But on January 18, 1915, everything changed. In the silence of night, they heard creaking sounds. Ice was surrounding the ship, tightening around it like a giant fist. Being trapped in the Weddell Sea was a situation the modern world couldn't imagine. Miles and miles of ice surrounded them, the nearest civilization 2,000 kilometers away, and no radio. That night, Shackleton wrote in his diary, "Ship stopped. Now the ice carries us." But he didn't panic. Instead, he used every trick to keep his crew's morale high. He established daily routines, morning exercises, dog sled races, musical evenings, even football matches. Imagine these men playing football on ice. This was the perfect example of Shackleton's leadership. As months passed, the situation worsened. Ice masses constantly moved, applying incredible pressure to the ship. At midnight, the ship would groan. Wooden beams would creak. The crew could hear their ship's death throes. November 21st, 1915, that unforgettable day, the Endurance was fighting its final battle. Ice masses began applying such powerful pressure that the ship was literally being crushed. Shackleton had to make an urgent decision. Abandon ship. "Ship dead," he wrote in his diary, but immediately added, "Long live the ship," because Endurance had been their home for 281 days, keeping them alive. Now 28 men were fighting for survival in the middle of endless ice, with only the supplies they could salvage from the ship. Tents, food, 3 lifeboats. That was all. Outside, temperatures of -30 degrees, winds of 100 kilometers per hour, and an environment where they could receive no help. Shackleton's leadership reached its peak here. Every morning he would walk through the tents, talking one-on-one with each man, making jokes, giving hope. He would cut from his own food rations to give to the sick. During night watch, he would check his crew's feet, changing their shoes to prevent frostbite. Their first camp was Ocean Camp. They stayed there for 2 months. The ice was moving, but very slowly. Shackleton constantly made maps, planning routes, but he was facing a reality beyond his control. Nature would take them wherever it wanted. The move to Patience Camp showed conditions were getting even worse. They would wait here for another 3.5 months. Food was running low, morale was breaking down. But Shackleton never gave up. He organized dog teams, went hunting, seal hunting, catching penguins. Everything was for survival. April 15th, 1916. Finally, the ice began to break up. Shackleton got his crew into 3 lifeboats toward open water. James Caird, Dudley Docker, and Stancomb Wills. These 3 small boats had become the only hope for 28 men. For 7 days, they traveled in open sea among massive waves. Temperature -20 degrees, waves 6 meters high. Men took turns rowing, trying to warm each other, quenching their thirst with ice. This was an experience that pushed the limits of human endurance. When they reached Elephant Island's shore, their feet touched land for the first time in 497 days. But this victory was temporary, because Elephant Island was also deserted, cold, and deadly. No ship would ever come there. Shackleton faced an impossible choice: either wait here to die or undertake one of history's most dangerous sea voyages. With the 6.5-meter James Caird lifeboat, he would try to reach South Georgia Island, 1,300 kilometers away. That distance was as far as traveling from Istanbul to Rome. But in the world's stormiest seas, in a small lifeboat, no GPS, no radio, trusting only a compass. Mathematically, this seemed like a suicide mission. Shackleton chose his best 5 men: Captain Worsley, Tom Crean, Timothy McCarthy, Harry McNish, and John Vincent. They left Elephant Island on April 24th, 1916. For the 22 men left behind, this might be a final farewell. The James Caird voyage is one of humanity's most challenging maritime adventures. For 17 days in the world's most dangerous waters, 6 men struggle for survival. The waves were so massive that sometimes the lifeboat would drop from 15 meters high, forcing the men to tie themselves together. They constantly took on water, ice accumulated on the boat. Every 4 hours, one would dangerously climb onto the boat to break the ice with an axe. One mistake meant death. Shackleton never slept. He constantly kept watch, checked their course, kept his men's morale up. He prepared warm drinks, made jokes, gave hope. For 17 days, he never complained. May 10th, 1916, when the South Georgia shores appeared, the men screamed wildly. But the joy came too early. The storm had thrown them to the wrong side of the island. The Stromness whaling station was on the other side, with uncharted mountains between them. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean crossed 50 kilometers of mountainous terrain in 36 hours. No sleep, little food, minimal equipment, just ice-covered mountains, cliffs, and death. But Shackleton knew there was no turning back. On the morning of May 20th, when they approached Stromness Station, the workers didn't recognize them. After 634 days, Shackleton had changed so much. Shackleton's first words: "My men on Elephant Island." He immediately organized a rescue ship, but Antarctic winter was approaching. Ice was thickening again. The first 3 attempts failed. August 30th, 1916. The 4th attempt. He tried his last chance with the Chilean ship Yelcho. As they approached Elephant Island's shore, Shackleton counted his men through binoculars. "They're all there! They're all alive," he shouted. 22 men had waited 4.5 months on Elephant Island for Shackleton's return, none losing hope. Because Shackleton had promised them, "I will return." Shackleton didn't cross Antarctica. He didn't reach his goal. Technically, this was a failure. But what he accomplished was far greater. For 635 days, under the most impossible conditions, he protected the lives of 28 people. He didn't lose a single one. This story teaches the true meaning of leadership. A leader isn't just someone who leads to success, but someone who protects his team even in the midst of failure. Shackleton couldn't complete his plan, but he accomplished something far more important. He showed humanity that seemingly impossible things are possible. Ernest Shackleton's story is still taught as a lesson in leadership academies today. From NASA astronauts to corporate executives, everyone studies his methods, because he is the perfect example of leadership in crisis. The Endurance ship was found under the ice in 2022 after 107 years, completely intact, as if it had sunk yesterday. Just like Shackleton's legacy, time had never worn it down. This is why Ernest Shackleton's story isn't just an exploration adventure, but a source of inspiration. He taught us this: when life brings you to your knees, your true character emerges. And sometimes the greatest failure can turn into the greatest victory. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't reaching your planned destination, but not leaving anyone behind on the journey.